everyone, it's Katie Crysdale here from Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. Welcome back to your weekly Aquatic Industry Insider. If it's been a while since you've been here, welcome back, or welcome if you are new. If you didn't watch my last update a few days ago, I'm getting back into filming these videos because of Bill C-18 here in Canada that's making it really hard to share different news and events on the Lakeview Aquatic Consultants Facebook page. So that used to be where I wanted to share all of the things going on in the commercial swimming pool industry, to share just everything that matters in terms of news, new products, goings on, industry trends. And that's just become really hard to do in the last year here in Canada with the disagreement that Meta, Facebook has been having with the Canadian federal government. So that's kind of driven me back to YouTube. I have a lot to say about different things going on. And honestly, it's probably a good thing that it forced me to consolidate what I was doing and bring it back to YouTube, because I like to talk, I have things to say, and frankly, one or two sentences to comment with a news article on Facebook probably was not enough. So here we are. So as I've been catching up on the different news articles that have been happening over the last couple of weeks, and I've been thinking about bringing back the Aquatic Industry Insider, there have been things that are worth talking about, even if they are not as timely this week. These are topics that come up again and again and again. These are classic topics that also pertain to certified pool operator training and basic risk management and liability for most commercial facilities. So today I want to talk specifically about chemical safety in and around the pool, specifically pertaining to safe chemical levels for customers, as well as the falsification of records by pool operators, as well as people who do not close their pools when they add chemicals to the basin. So let's start with this big article that came out a couple of weeks ago. So this article here is from poolmagazine.com, and you'll see this article on a couple of different mainstream news websites, but this is really the best version in what I've been reading and the most amount of detail. Pool Magazine is a trade publication, so they are geared towards pool operators, pool service technicians, and able to get us the level of detail that most of us really want and need. So the headline here from 2 weeks ago: resort will pay record $26 million settlement for chlorine burns in pool. This settlement is from the US. So the headline is essentially a Myrtle Beach resort is set to pay $26 million to resolve a federal lawsuit arising from a 2020 incident in which a 3-year-old sustained severe chlorine burns while staying at the Caribbean Resort, which is the name of the property, not the location, according to a press release. This occurred over the Memorial Day long weekend in 2020. So this settlement is almost 4 years later. It goes on to say that essentially the lawsuit claims that the child was exposed to very, very high chlorine levels, and the parents became aware of this after leaving the resort. Their child's health condition deteriorated over the next day and a half. They took them to the hospital, where it was determined that the child was actually burned from high levels of chlorine. And this resulted in blistering, and I'll show you the photos later. I'll provide a clear warning when I do that because they are pretty graphic. But the lawsuit then went on to claim that the pool operator, who in another report is said to have had training. I don't know if that's Pool and Hot Tub Alliance certified pool operator training or what, but was charged for falsifying chlorine and pH levels in the daily logs. So the state of South Carolina had investigated. They came to the site, and the records for that day showed that the pool was compliant, but their manual tests of the basin showed extremely high chlorine levels. According to the report from South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control, tests conducted on the Lazy River and spa revealed chlorine levels exceeding 10, with the Lazy River's pH level at 8.1, well beyond the regulatory range of 7 to 7.8. So to take a step back here for a second, I am a CPO instructor with the Pool and Hot Tub Alliance. The Certified Pool Operator course is a foundation that we teach, which includes things such as industry safety ranges for maintaining chemicals, regulatory compliance, all of those things. In general, within the industry, I would say broadly the pH range that's acceptable is 7.2 or 7.0 to 7.8. Each jurisdiction may have a different range, but 8.1 is not acceptable in any jurisdiction that I'm familiar with. And the key piece to be aware of with this is that 8.1 is not just a quote, little bit higher than 7.8. The pH scale is logarithmic. And so a difference of even 7.9 from 7.8 or 8.0 to 7.9 is substantially higher in strength. Then if we factor in that this was a small child, sensitive skin, small body, it is not surprising that the child was severely injured. Attorney Nick Rowley, representing the family, expressed frustration, stating that the resort's logbook indicated normal chlorine levels on the days that the child used the pool. However, an investigation revealed that a resort employee certified in pool operation, right? So did they have a CPO certificate from the Pool and Hot Tub Alliance, the National Swimming Pool Foundation, or any other agency, had entered data on days when he wasn't on duty, including the day of the child's injury. So this brings me to a topic that I see unfortunately a lot on site visits when I go out to see certified pool operator students or when I am doing a proposal for a client who's interested in consulting services. I cannot stress enough that I have seen falsified records over the years. People who have used the same pen, the same writing to populate in advance chlorine and pH readings for their facility because they cannot be bothered. They don't want to deal with having to complete yet another water chemistry test. And having just gotten out of a CPO class a few hours ago in which we talked about Chapter 8, chemical testing, we talked about Chapter 9, chemical feed and control, it is entirely possible for this pool mechanical equipment to overfeed and not have software set up to stop that overfeed or reduce that overfeed. It is entirely possible for human error in the testing to take place, and probes on the controller or the automation are reading the chemical levels incorrectly and overfeeding a chemical that is quite dangerous in a high volume. That is why so many jurisdictions in North America require commercial swimming pools, spas, hot tubs, lazy rivers, water slides, what have you, to manually confirm the chemistry levels prior to the pool opening to customers and at set intervals throughout the day. These chemicals that we use, whether it is calcium hypochlorite or muriatic acid, are so dangerous in their undiluted, concentrated form that we need to verify that these pools are safe before our customers swim. So it is completely unreasonable and completely irresponsible and negligent for a facility operator to purport to claim or have tested the chemical levels when they're not at work that day, or to falsify chemical levels or test results that are inaccurate for that day. And also, I would further say not to close the pool if they tested levels beyond the safe threshold for that state or county. So it's not surprising that this settlement occurred. Swimming in a pH of 8.1 for several minutes, several hours, it's not reported how long the child was in the pool, but is not surprising that the child was injured. I do want to show you the photos of that injury coming up here in just a moment, so don't keep watching the video or minimize it if you are squeamish. The reason I feel it's really important to share these photos that were shared by the family, I did fall under the stereotype initially that maybe this family was seeking compensation for something that wasn't that serious. And these photos really highlighted to me that this family was absolutely correct in seeking some sort of compensation from the resort or seeking for consequences for the individual who falsified the records. Because again, prior to seeing these photos, I just assumed that they were making a mountain out of a molehill, so to speak. But you can see from these photos that there were actually substantial injuries. That is unfortunately an important lesson that we can all learn as commercial pool operators or aquatic facility managers. So I'm going to click to those photos now. this is part of a slideshow. I will link to this article in the bottom of the video. Essentially, there are several photos of the facility. This is from WPDE.com. This is pertaining to the chlorine burns at the Caribbean Resort in Myrtle Beach. So as you can see from this photo, these are not insubstantial burns. This is on a 3-year-old. This is in the lower abdomen approaching the groin area. This is substantial blistering. This is not a small thing. This is not a small rash or some redness. This is quite substantial, and I can only imagine the levels in the water. They might have come down between the time that the incident was reported several days later. If the chlorine was above 10 when the incident occurred on May 25th, 2020, and the health inspector, the Department of Public Health in South Carolina, only showed up at the property 2 days later, per the reports of the family, after going to the hospital and having the child admitted to the burn unit. It is shocking to imagine what those chemical levels could have been 2 days earlier when this incident actually first occurred. There is another photo here as well. You can see damage as the skin was flaking off, blistering off. This is not a small thing. So I think it is really worthwhile for us to understand that there are true consequences to not completing our water testing as mandated by the state or the province. Falsifying records, there's no excuse for that. And as I say to all my certified pool operator classes, we can just close the pool. It's a very simple thing to do. We are not doing brain surgery. Closing the pool, doing some investigation with no customers present is a far more prudent step to take than keeping the pool open and risking liability. This is another article from usatoday.com. This repeats a lot of the content in the earlier article I showed you from Pool Magazine, but this one does go into more detail in terms of the medical attention that the parents sought for their child, starting with noticing some redness upon departing the pool, going to see the pediatrician the next day, who then prescribed Bactroban. And then the next day, the blisters got worse. And then the child was taken to the local hospital, where they were then transferred to a burn unit at a different hospital. The burns were diagnosed as chemical. And then the child ended up spending a week in the burn unit, which I think is considerable, not, an overnight stay in the ER, and then had substantial scarring and then debridement, which is the surgical removal of the dead skin or the damaged skin. So this is not a small thing. And I think this is a really worthwhile example. It's a horrible case where we need to acknowledge that pool operations can be exceedingly dangerous when things go wrong. We really do need to consider that pools are amazing amenities when they are well maintained, but they are a vat of very dangerous chemicals when they are not properly monitored and tested. And there is no excuse that this happened. There are multiple opportunities for this situation to have been prevented. And I'm not typically one who's very litigious, but I think it makes sense that this settlement was reached. I won't say fairly quickly because we don't know what happened behind the scenes, but the evidence is very clear. If the records were falsified, the levels were measured at a very high level 1 or 2 days after the incident. The child's injuries speak for themselves as being very substantial to my eyes, and I'm not a medical professional, but that's part of the reason I wanted to show these photos, is because I initially take full responsibility for thinking, it can't be that bad. And then when I did see these photos, I realized, no, this is really a story we need to be talking about, because this is probably happening more than it's been documented. And we do need to be having this conversation within our industry. Before I wrap up, I actually wanted to share another news article that is about the same issue pertaining to chemical safety with bathers. So as I was reading about this story, I came across another story that I had seen recently, which I thought was just a duplication of this same settlement from Myrtle Beach in South Carolina. This is actually a different incident that I want to share because it's just as bad for different reasons. So this article is from Yahoo News in Canada. It's a reprint of the Kansas City Star. I want to say a kudos to Yahoo, which I don't generally think of as a strong supporter of the news, but I've noticed recently that they are licensing a lot of news articles that are otherwise behind a paywall. And so I actually wanted to read this article from the Kansas City Star. It came up in the original Google News alert. I get one every day of the year, one for swimming pool, one for drowning, and it allows me to stay on top of the news and see what's going on in our industry because it often pulls these lesser articles that are very important for our industry, but don't make it into the mainstream media or don't produce substantial headlines in the traditional dry news, as it were. So I was very happy to see that Yahoo had the rights to republish this article. So this is from Wednesday, February 7th, 2024. Kids suffer burns when hotel worker dumps chemicals in pool with them in it, lawsuit says. 3 families are suing a hotel after they say an employee poured chemicals into the hotel's pool while children were swimming. This lawsuit was filed on February 1st of 2024 in relation to a May 8th, 2021 incident. On Mother's Day weekend, a youth baseball team stayed at the Grand Plaza Hotel. After a day on the fields, the team decided to unwind with a swim in the hotel's indoor pool. While the team, along with young children and adults, swam and played, a hotel worker conducted a routine treatment of the pool, often known as shocking, according to the lawsuit. The employee poured ProGuard calcium hypochlorite granular into the pool while people were still swimming. So if you are a pool operator, then you know that calcium hypochlorite is a form of chlorine. Granular means it's a crystal, looks like kosher salt, and it is quite strong. It's anywhere from 40 to 70% pure and active ingredients, depending on the brand. I don't know for this particular brand what the concentration was, but typically when you add chlorine to the pool, especially a smaller volume of water, like a smaller pool with a larger amount of chlorine, that is done outside of operating hours, or the pool is cleared, the customers are asked to leave. We should never be adding chemicals to the pool while the pool is in use. And then it goes on to say that the occupants of the pool immediately felt effects of the chemicals, including burning eyes, burning skin, chest tightness, shortness of breath. I mean, that's not entirely surprising if you had that strength of chlorine poured into the pool next to your naked body. I certainly would not want to be swimming while chlorine was added to the pool. It reminds me, unfortunately, February being Black History Month, of the very famous photo from segregation where the man is pouring liquid chlorine directly into the pool where there is a swim in by Black swimmers. Let me go to that. So this is the photo I was talking about, which was recently shared on the page Stop Drowning Now. It's a nonprofit that I follow on Facebook. And this is a very famous photo pertaining to civil rights in the US. In June 1964, at the Monson Motor Lodge in St. Augustine, Florida, James Brock, the motel owner, dumped muriatic acid into the pool to enforce his whites-only pool policy when Black members of the community entered the pool in protest. Absolutely horrific if you've ever had muriatic acid on your skin, even just a splash. Going out of your way to pour a jug or a gallon directly into the pool with people is just unconscionable. So let's go back to the news story I was mentioning. The article then goes on to talk about the fact that the employee ignored warning signs on the chemical to keep out of reach of children. And the employee proceeded to scoop the chemicals directly into the pool while the families were swimming, including getting some of the chemicals directly on the people of the pool. None of the guests were notified of what the employee was doing and what chemicals were being poured into the pool, according to court documents. One child allegedly sustained permanent damage to her lungs and throat. The court documents say the employee shocked the pool on 2 separate occasions that night prior to the pool's closure while guests were swimming in the pool. This led to 12 children needing to be medically treated. So it's unclear to me from this article if the same families were in the pool on two separate occasions, or it was the same group of families from the baseball tournament. But there is no excuse for adding chemical to the pool when people are swimming once. If it happened twice, that is obviously very, very concerning. I certainly have heard of cases where the pool is closed, i.e., there's nobody in it right now, and the pool operator goes to dump chemicals into the basin and neglects to put up the sign saying that the pool is now closed for 30 minutes while the chemicals disperse and are balanced. Certainly, I've heard of cases where people went into the pool unknowingly and then the chemical levels were dangerously high. But to take it a step further and add chemicals while people are swimming is just really shocking and disappointing. But I want to say that I'm surprised. I was swimming at a municipal pool here in Alberta probably in the last decade. And I watched as a lifeguard came over with a measuring cup of, I believe it was baking soda, sodium bicarbonate, I don't know for sure. And they dumped it in the water in the corner of the pool. Now, baking soda is not dangerous. It is used to raise total alkalinity. Alkalinity here in Alberta is extremely low. But from a management perspective, as somebody who teaches pool operators, who's had a team of staff, I consider it to be a very slippery slope to let any staff member of any age add any chemicals while the pool is open for use. Because what if they don't know the impacts of another chemical that they choose to add while the pool is open? And then on the same visit, they did, the same lifeguard came back 5 or 10 minutes later with a jug of what appeared to be algicide or some sort of flocking, gluey, sticky, thick, viscous liquid in a plastic measuring cup, and then proceeded to hold up the container, kind of tip it against the skimmer plate. So this was an older pool, not with a weir door, but with a sort of slatted grid. And they proceeded to hold the cup up against the skimmer door or skimmer grid and pour the chemical quote into the skimmer. And I was just really disappointed to see this happen because although it was a large municipal pool, the chemical was not poured on me or poured on anyone swimming. I also know the mechanical on the backside of this particular pool. It's an open DE pit. And although we don't recommend adding chemicals to pits because it will degrade the septums and the grids, I would much rather see a lifeguard dump a couple cups of algicide into the pit rather than in the pool while people are swimming. It really had me concerned for this facility that they would let their staff do that or knowingly have their staff do that, because although in that situation it might have been non-toxic or not harmful, there are times in the day, operating breaks, in which it would be appropriate to do that, not during public swim. So all of that to say, I wanted to bring these articles to light because in the span of several weeks, there's two glaring examples of situations where people added chemicals to the pool or maintained the pool at a level that was completely unsafe to the customers. And when we think about our compliance as commercial pool operators or anybody running any pool for that matter, the water has to be chemically safe, yes, to prevent bacteria outbreaks and people getting sick, but it's still also human flesh and skin. It's my eyeballs, it's my ears, it's your child's face, it's an elderly person's, very thin, papery skin. It has to be appropriate for us to swim in. And sometimes we are losing the forest for the trees in terms of not recognizing that we have half-naked people swimming in this water. And what is our duty of care to them and to our organization when we invite them in to swim? So that was a bit longer than I intended, but something that I'm very passionate about and some really worthwhile articles I would encourage you to check out in the information box underneath. If you have any thoughts, anything you want to add, other articles that you think are relevant to this topic or other accounts of these issues or your own situation with these types of stories, please leave a comment below. Let me know. How can we increase awareness in our industry and prevent these things from happening again? Until next time, we'll see you again. Bye for now.